My name is Helen Brooks, and I was 38 years old when the man I thought I'd grow old with sat me down after our children went to sleep and asked me to choose between him and my sister. At first, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt absurd, like a line from a bad drama that didn't belong in our living room. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get once toys are put away and bedtime stories are done. I remember thinking he looked unusually calm, almost rehearsed, sitting across from me on the couch with his hands folded like this was a meeting he'd scheduled. "I need you to choose," he said. "Me or your sister." We had been together for 7 years, 2 kids, a shared life filled with routines, sacrifices, inside jokes, and the kind of trust you don't realize you're relying on until it cracks beneath your feet. Nothing in our history prepared me for what he said next. "I'm done sharing you." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. "Sharing me?" I asked. "She's my sister." He exhaled sharply, already irritated like I was being deliberately dense. "She's always there. Every decision. Every holiday. Every birthday. I'm tired of it." That didn't match reality, not even close. My older sister lived 20 minutes away. We texted a few times a week, had dinner maybe once a month. She was their aunt. She showed up because that's what family does. She didn't intrude. She didn't interfere. She didn't overstay. "I'm not cutting her off," I said slowly. "That's not even a choice." His face hardened. "Then I guess I know where I stand." That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. And that's when I knew something was very, very wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that the ultimatum hadn't come from insecurity or jealousy, but from fear. Fear of something surfacing. Fear of someone who knew too much. So the next day, I called my sister. There was a long pause on the line. "Can we meet in person?" she finally said. "There's something I need to tell you." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my life began to unravel. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and rain-soaked pavement, the kind of place people chose for serious conversations because it felt neutral, anonymous. My sister was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly with both hands wrapped around her cup, like she needed the warmth to steady herself. She looked composed at first glance. Tailored coat hair, perfectly in place, but I'd known her my entire life. The tension sat in her shoulders tight and unyielding. My sister didn't get rattled. Not by boardroom confrontations, not by audits, not by high-stakes financial disputes. Seeing her like this made my stomach tighten before she'd even spoken. "I didn't want to do this in public," she said as soon as I sat down, her voice low. "But I didn't want to do it at your house either." That was my first real warning. Not the ultimatum from my boyfriend. Not the way he'd slept in the guest room and then pretended everything was fine. This, my sister, choosing a neutral location like she was about to deliver evidence. "What's going on?" I asked. "Did something happen between you and him?" She hesitated, eyes flicking to the window before settling back on me. "I found something, and I wasn't looking for it." The words hit heavier than they should have. "Found what?" "A few months ago," she said slowly, "I was finishing the last details of Mom's estate. You remember how long probate dragged on?" Of course I remembered. Almost a year of paperwork, phone calls, and late-night emails. My sister had handled most of it. She was a corporate accountant who specialized in financial investigations. If anyone in the family could untangle a mess, it was her. "There was a discrepancy," she continued. "A big one." I frowned. "We already got our shares." "Did you verify that?" she asked gently. The question made my chest tighten. "What are you saying?" Instead of answering, she slid a thin folder across the table toward me. Inside were bank statements, transaction histories, highlighted numbers I didn't fully understand yet. But one thing was immediately clear: dates, amounts, patterns. Mom's investment account was supposed to be split evenly, she said. 400,000 total, 200 for you, 200 for me. "I know," I said. "Mine went into our savings." She shook her head. It didn't. The cafe noise faded into a dull hum. "What do you mean it didn't?" "Your boyfriend opened a separate account 3 weeks before Mom died," she said. "When your inheritance hit your personal account, he transferred your 200,000 into that account within 48 hours. I stared at her. "That's impossible. He couldn't. He had access," she said quietly, "and it's in his name only." My hands felt numb as I flipped through the pages. There it was. The account number. The transfer timeline. The balance. Black and white. Unarguable. "Why would he do this?" I whispered. "We're not struggling. We're fine." "I don't know," she said. "But I do know this: when I started asking questions, he told me to stay out of things that didn't concern me." A cold wave washed over me. "When was this?" 2 months ago," she said. When I told him I planned to talk to you, he threatened me. Threatened you how? Her jaw tightened. He said if I said anything, he'd make sure I never saw the kids again. That he'd tell you I was trying to sabotage your relationship. That I was obsessed with you, jealous of him. The ultimatum snapped into place in my mind like a final puzzle piece. He wasn't trying to push boundaries. He was trying to eliminate the one person who could expose him. I almost stayed quiet, my sister admitted. I didn't want to hurt you, but when he demanded you choose, I knew he was getting desperate. I sat back staring at the folder, my entire body buzzing with shock. 7 years, 2 kids, a shared life built on something I'd thought was trust. What do I do? I asked. That's up to you, she said. I just couldn't let you live without knowing. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you for telling me. That night, I went home and checked the account myself. It was real, still active, holding over $215,000. And that was when I realized the man sleeping under my roof wasn't just lying to me. He'd been planning his exit the entire time. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while he slept in the next room. The house filled with the soft, innocent sounds of our children breathing down the hall. I felt like I was sharing a home with someone I'd never actually met. Every memory from the past 7 years replayed itself through a new lens. Every reassurance, every financial decision, every moment I'd brushed off a strange feeling because love had taught me not to question. I didn't confront him, not yet. I needed facts, not just fury. The next morning, while he packed lunches and joked with the kids like nothing had changed, I slipped into the bathroom and locked the door. My hands were shaking as I opened our banking apps, my heart pounding so loudly, I was afraid he'd hear it through the walls. I told myself I was being dramatic, that there had to be an explanation. There wasn't. The account was real. A separate bank. His name only. The balance sat there calmly, unapologetically, at just over $215,000. Interest had accumulated. It hadn't been touched in months, like money set aside, deliberately, patiently waiting. An exit fund. I felt nauseous. I went through everything slowly, methodically, the way my sister would. Dates lined up perfectly with the distribution of my mother's estate. 48 hours. That was all it took for him to move my inheritance out of reach before I'd even had time to notice it existed. He hadn't panicked. He hadn't rushed. He'd planned. At breakfast, he asked me if I wanted coffee. I nodded and thanked him, my voice steady despite the storm inside my chest. I watched him kiss the kids' heads. Before school, watched him smile at me, like he always did, like this wasn't a man who'd stolen from me and then tried to erase my sister to keep his secret buried. That was the worst part, the normalcy. The way he laughed, the way he complained about traffic, the way he asked what we should make for dinner. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. The luxury skincare products he claimed were on sale. The designer bag he said his mother had bought him. The spa days he paid for in cash. None of it had ever raised alarms because we were comfortable. I trusted him. Trust makes you blind in small, dangerous ways. I began documenting everything. Screenshots of the account, copies of statements, dates, amounts, notes written in a private journal I kept hidden at the bottom of a drawer. Every interaction that felt even slightly off, I wrote down. When he snapped at me for texting my sister. When he casually mentioned that maybe the kids didn't need to see her so often. When he asked a little too carefully if I'd talked to her lately. A few days later, I met with a divorce attorney during my lunch break, sitting in a quiet office that smelled faintly of old books and lemon cleaner. I laid everything out on the table, the secret account, the transfers, the ultimatum, the threats. Her expression shifted from polite professionalism to something sharper as she reviewed the documents. This is serious, she said. Inheritances are separate property in most states. What he did could be considered financial deception, possibly worse. What are my options? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That depends on what you want, she said. But you have leverage, a lot of it. I walked out of that office knowing one thing for certain, he still thought he was in control. He thought I was confused, emotional cornered. I let him believe it. Because sometimes the most dangerous moment isn't when the truth comes out, it's when the liar thinks they've already won. Once I knew what to look for, I started seeing it everywhere. It began subtly. Offhand comments, casual observations wrapped in concern, the kind of remarks that sound harmless unless you recognize the pattern forming underneath them. You've been distracted lately, he said one evening while loading the dishwasher. Ever since your sister started inserting herself again. I didn't respond. I just watched the water swirl in the sink, my reflection warped and unrecognizable. A few days later, he mentioned that his parents wanted to have dinner on Sunday. Nothing big, he said too quickly, just family. By then I understood what that meant. It wasn't about dinner, it was about witnesses. Sunday night, his parents' house felt tense before we'd even sat down. His mother kept giving me long, searching looks. His father avoided eye contact entirely. His brother jumped into conversation like he was already mid-argument. "We're worried about you," his mother said after dessert, folding her napkin with exaggerated care. "You seem pulled in too many directions." My pulse stayed calm. I'd expected this. "What do you mean?" "Your relationship with your sister," his brother cut in. "It's not normal for a grown woman to prioritize her sibling over her own family." I turned toward my boyfriend. He was staring at his plate jaw, tight, like this was difficult for him, like he hadn't orchestrated the entire thing. "My sister lives 20 minutes away," I said evenly. "We see her maybe once a month." "It's not about distance," he said finally. "It's emotional. Every time something happens, you go to her." That wasn't true, and he knew it. But facts don't matter when you're rewriting history in front of an audience. His mother nodded sympathetically. "Boundaries are healthy. Sometimes family can be too close." I felt the weight of it, then, the careful framing, the shared glances. He hadn't just vented, he'd prepared them. Fed them a version of events where he was the neglected partner and I was the unreasonable one, incapable of detaching from my sister. "She's their aunt," I said. "She's supposed to be there. Maybe she should focus on building her own life instead of clinging to yours," his brother said, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. The room went quiet. I didn't react. I didn't defend. I didn't explode the way they were clearly bracing for. I just nodded slowly like someone absorbing feedback. "I'll think about it," I said. The relief on his face was instant. The tension dissolved. On the drive home, he was chatty, almost giddy, like a man who thought he'd successfully steered the narrative back in his favor. That night after he fell asleep, I called my sister. "They're trying to isolate me," I said quietly. "Make me cut you off before I can act." She didn't sound surprised. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let him think he's winning," I said. "And then I'm going to expose everything." Over the next week, I moved carefully. I contacted my mother's estate lawyer and confirmed what my sister had already told me: the inheritance was supposed to go directly to me. No one else had authority to touch it. Every transfer had been documented. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and redirected a small portion of my paycheck there. Not enough to raise suspicion, just enough to give me breathing room. And then I started gathering witnesses, friends, coworkers, anyone who'd seen our relationship clearly enough to counter the story he was spreading. I didn't rush. I didn't confront. Because he wasn't just lying to me anymore. He was building a case, and I was about to tear it apart. The invitation came 3 weeks later, delivered with a softness that made my skin crawl. "I think we need to do this properly," he said one evening while the kids colored at the table. "A real conversation, with everyone there. No misunderstandings." I looked up from my phone. "Everyone. My parents, my brother, my aunt," he said, "and your sister. I think it's important she hears how her involvement has affected our marriage." There it was, the confidence, the assumption that I was cornered, that I'd already accepted his version of reality. He thought this was the final step, public pressure, moral high ground, the moment where I'd finally be forced to choose. "I agree," I said calmly. "We should talk it out." The relief on his face was immediate. He had no idea I'd already extended another invitation. The day of the intervention, his parents' dining room felt more like a courtroom than a family space. Chairs were arranged carefully, water glasses lined up. Everyone arrived early, tense and expectant. My sister came first, composed, but alert, her eyes meeting mine with quiet understanding. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. He arrived last, confident, almost buoyant. "Thank you all for coming," he began, standing at the head of the table like a man about to deliver a keynote speech. "I know this is uncomfortable, but I love Helen, and I need to protect our marriage." He spoke smoothly rehearsed, about emotional neglect, about feeling second place, about my sister's constant presence. His family nodded along, murmuring in agreement. They'd heard this version before. Then he turned to my sister. "This isn't personal. I just need my partner to be fully present in our relationship." She didn't respond. She just looked at me. That's when the door opened. "Sorry I'm late," a man said, stepping inside and glancing around the room. Traffic was terrible. My boyfriend froze. "This," I said evenly, "is the attorney who handled my mother's estate." Confusion rippled through the room. His mother frowned. Why is he here? Because since we're discussing family matters, I said, pulling a familiar folder from my bag, I think it's time we discuss the money. I laid the documents out one by one. Bank statements, transfer records, dates, amounts. The air grew heavy as the truth settled in. 2 years ago, I said I inherited $200,000 from my mother. That money was supposed to go into our household savings. Instead, it was transferred into a private account, one I didn't know existed. That's not, he started. The lawyer spoke calmly. The funds were deposited into Helen's personal account on March 15th. Within 48 hours, they were moved to an account registered solely in your name. His mother picked up the papers, her hands shaking slightly. Is this real? He looked at me, panic flickering behind his eyes. It was for emergencies. For us. Then why didn't I know about it? I asked. Why was it hidden? Why did you threaten my sister to keep her quiet? Silence. The carefully constructed narrative collapsed in on itself. His aunt spoke first. So you wanted her sister gone because she knew. His brother stared at the table, jaw clenched. His mother's face drained of color. I was scared, he said, finally, his voice breaking. I needed security. So you stole from me, I said, and tried to isolate me from the only person who noticed. No one defended him. Not this time. The meeting ended quickly after that. People left without knowing what to say. The performance was over. The truth was out. As my sister and I walked to the car, she let out a long breath. That was intense. It's not over, I said, but now everyone knows who he really is. And for the first time since this all began, I felt the power shift completely. Once the truth was out, he didn't apologize. He pivoted. The calm, wounded partner persona disappeared almost overnight, replaced by something sharper and more desperate. He stopped pretending we were a couple trying to work through issues and started treating everything like a negotiation he could still win. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Regret would have sounded different. This was strategy. The legal process began quietly, but moved fast. My lawyer filed first, armed with documentation so thorough it left very little room for interpretation. Bank records, estate documents, timelines, screenshots, a clean, methodical record of deception that stretched back 2 years. He denied the account existed. When that failed, he claimed it was marital property. When that collapsed under basic legal scrutiny, he shifted again, arguing that he had been managing our finances and that everything he did was for the family. The language was careful, rehearsed, and hollow. He wasn't defending the truth. He was testing angles. The court didn't buy it. Inheritance law was clear. My mother's money was separate property. It had never touched a joint account. It had been moved within 48 hours, deliberately and quietly, to an account in his name only. That single detail destroyed every argument he tried to make. But the money was only half the battle. Custody is where he went for blood. His lawyers painted him as the primary caregiver, the devoted father who had scaled back his career while I worked full-time. Technically, parts of that were true. But context matters, and truth without context is just another manipulation. My lawyer dismantled the narrative piece by piece. The threats to my sister, the attempt to isolate me from family, the intervention staged under false pretenses, the documented pattern of financial deception. And then came the journal. I hadn't gone looking for it. I'd found it by accident on his laptop while backing up family photos for court, an unprotected document saved under a generic file name. Inside were entries spanning months, plans, contingencies, thoughts about positioning the kids emotionally if things fell apart, notes about making sure they sided with him. The custody evaluator took that very seriously. Interviews followed. Long ones. With me. With him. With my sister. With friends and coworkers who could speak to stability and consistency. Even his own mother admitted reluctantly that her son struggled with honesty when he felt threatened. That admission mattered more than she realized. The evaluator's report was clear. While both parents loved the children, one had demonstrated a pattern of manipulation, secrecy, and willingness to weaponize relationships. Stability required transparency. The ruling came down on a gray Tuesday morning. Joint legal custody, 60-40 physical custody, primary residential parent me. He exploded in the courthouse hallway. "You're taking my children because of money," he shouted loud enough for people to stare. "No," I said evenly. "I'm protecting them because of your choices." He went pale when my lawyer mentioned the journal. "You read that," he hissed. "That was private." "So was my inheritance," I said. "You didn't seem concerned about privacy then." He didn't respond. He just turned and walked away, gripping his lawyer's arm like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The war was over, and he had lost far more than he ever planned to risk. Life didn't snap back into place once the court rulings were finalized. There was no sudden calm, no cinematic fade out, where everything felt resolved just because the paperwork said it was. What followed was quieter than the chaos that came before, but heavier in a different way, the kind of weight that settles in after the adrenaline fades. I moved with the kids into a smaller place not far from their school. It wasn't grand, but it was ours. Familiar routines slowly reformed, morning drop-offs, homework. At the kitchen table, bedtime stories read from the same worn books they'd always loved. I focused on consistency, on giving them something solid when everything else in their world had shifted. He didn't take the outcome well. At first, his messages were frantic, long paragraphs accusing me of betrayal, of destroying our family, of humiliating him in front of his parents. When that didn't get a response, the tone turned bitter and sharp. He complained about the custody schedule, about money, about how unfair everything was. Not once did he acknowledge the account, the threats, the manipulation. In his mind, those details were irrelevant footnotes in a story where he was the victim. I forwarded every message to my lawyer and stopped replying altogether. His family, interestingly, kept their distance. After the intervention, the illusion they'd been fed had shattered too completely to be repaired with excuses. His mother sent a short text a week after the ruling. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." I never responded, but I appreciated the honesty. It was more accountability than her son ever showed. My sister became my anchor through all of it. She helped set up the apartment. She picked the kids up from school when court dates ran late. She became their emergency contact, their constant. Everything he had tried to strip away from me, my support system, my sense of stability, she quietly helped rebuild. The kids asked questions, of course. Why doesn't Daddy live with us anymore? I kept my answers simple, gentle, age-appropriate. Sometimes grown-ups decide to live in different houses, but we both love you very much. My therapist helped me find that language, helped me understand how important it was not to make them carry adult truths they weren't ready to hold. He didn't show the same restraint. The kids came home from his weekends with questions that twisted my stomach. Daddy says you were mean to him. Daddy says Auntie shouldn't come over anymore. I documented every instance, every word, every shift in behavior. My lawyer warned me gently that if it continued, we'd need to address it legally. Parental alienation wasn't taken lightly. The money was back where it belonged. Most of it went straight into accounts earmarked for the kids' futures college funds, long-term security. The rest helped stabilize our new life. I knew my mother would have approved. She'd saved every penny with intention. It felt right to honor that. He moved back in with his parents. On his part-time income, he couldn't afford a place of his own, and the settlement hadn't left him with much flexibility. He resented me for that too, as if consequences were something I'd personally assigned him, rather than the natural outcome of his own actions. Every so often, he'd send one last jab, one final attempt to provoke a reaction. Your sister won. One message read, "I hope you're happy being married to her instead." I didn't respond. Projection loses its power when you recognize it for what it is. I was exhausted, yes. But for the first time in months, I wasn't confused. The fog was gone. I could see my life clearly, what I'd lost, what I'd kept, and what I was slowly rebuilding. And I knew this wasn't the end of the story yet. The quiet came slowly, not all at once. It arrived in pieces, an uninterrupted night of sleep, a morning where my chest didn't tighten when my phone buzzed. An afternoon where laughter came easily again. I didn't notice it at first. Healing rarely announces itself. It just shows up one day and stays. I stopped waiting for him to understand what he'd done. That was the final lesson. Accountability isn't something you can force on someone who spent their life rewriting reality to suit themselves. In his version of events, he was still the wrong party, the partner pushed too far. The parent unfairly judged the man punished for trying to protect his family. Admitting the truth would mean admitting intent, and intent would mean accepting blame. He wasn't built for that. I was done trying to make him see. The kids settled into the new rhythm faster than I expected. Children are resilient when they're given stability and honesty without cruelty. Our apartment began to feel like home, not because of the furniture or the layout, but because it was free of tension. No walking on eggshells, no half-truths humming under the surface. Just life, imperfect, but real. My sister came by often, sometimes to help, sometimes just to sit on the floor with the kids and build something out of blocks. Watching her with them, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. Family isn't the people who demand loyalty at the expense of truth. It's the people who risk discomfort to protect you from a lie. She could have stayed silent. She could have let me live in ignorance and avoided the fallout. Instead, she chose honesty, knowing it might cost her everything. That mattered more than I could ever put into words. The money sat safely where it belonged, most of it untouched, earmarked for futures that mattered more than comfort or appearances. I didn't feel triumphant about getting it back. I felt relieved, like something stolen had finally been returned to its rightful place, not just the inheritance, but my sense of reality. Every once in a while, I still receive messages from him, complaints, accusations, reminders of how unfair the world has been to him. I don't engage. I forward them, file them away, and move on. Silence, I've learned, is sometimes the clearest boundary you can set. People ask if I'm angry. I was. For a long time. Angry at him for the betrayal. Angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Angry at how easily trust can be weaponized by the wrong person. But anger burns itself out if you don't keep feeding it. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness, it was clarity. Here's what I know now. Trust is not blind faith. Love does not mean surrendering awareness. Pay attention to your finances. Ask questions. Notice patterns. If something feels off, it probably is. And if someone tries to isolate you from the people who love you, ask yourself why. My ex wanted me to choose between him and my sister. In the end, he made the choice for me. By stealing. By lying. By manipulating. By believing he was clever enough to get away with it forever. He didn't just lose a relationship or a financial cushion or the narrative he worked so hard to control. He lost trust. He lost credibility. He lost the future he thought he was securing in secret.